agency, and Orphe Divounguy, who's a senior economist at Zillow, and we are going to talk about the future of real estate. So what can we expect the market to look like 20 years from now? So to that end, I started this sort of thinking about this by thinking back to what the market looked like 20 years ago, which would be 2003. So if you think about that, in 2003, the median home price was $168,000, and that was just up 7% from the previous year. So home prices were rising, interest rates were considered low at 5.5%, they were down from 7%, and there were 2.3 million homes on the market with about 5 months supply. So we had this like healthy, moving market. It was also affordable. That median income family had 143% of the income that they needed to buy a median priced home, assuming they got a mortgage. Of course, this was also in the Wild West of mortgages, so you have to take all that a little bit of grain of salt. So where will we be 20 years from now? So in 20 years from now, the oldest millennials will be 60. Just putting that out there. And starting to think about retirement. The climate will be a lot warmer. I don't know if any of you are flying back to New York tomorrow, but good luck. And so I want to talk about where we are now and where we're headed. So I think the most pressing issue we are today is affordability, right? So we don't have this market we had 20 years ago where, if you had a pulse, you'd buy a house. But even if you were well financed, you could afford a house. So that's I think the most pressing issue. And so if we get past the short-term issues of interest rates and whether people are holding on to their mortgages, holding on to their homes with their cheap mortgages, what's going to be the long-term trend of affordability? So what do you maybe we can start with you about what are you saying about what could move the needle for affordability, and what's your thoughts about that?
I think more supply, right? But let me start by saying that like you said, 20 years from now is a long time, right?
Right.
And if you had told me at the start of the pandemic that house prices were going to appreciate 40 to 60% in the middle of a global pandemic, I would have said that's crazy.
In 2 years.
In 2 years,
right.
Exactly. So it's really, really difficult to predict the housing market 1, 2, or 3 years from now,
right.
Let alone 20 or 30 years from now.
Right.
But what I think I see is a few, maybe 4 main existing trends that are likely going to kind of shape and drive the future of housing. These trends are going to be, you alluded to this, right? Climate change.
Right.
You have more climate disasters. Recently we saw, the insurance debacle in California.
Right.
We have the water supply issue in Phoenix. We have atmospheric rivers and floods everywhere, right? So climate disasters are definitely going to drive housing going forward. And it's going to make space is already costly. It's going to make space even more costly. So that's the first thing. The second thing is family size has been shrinking, right, in the United States, right? So we used to have 4 people in a family. Now we're down to the typical family is only 2 individuals. All right. So family size shrinking since the 60s means that combined with more expensive space means that supply is going to have to adjust. The types of homes we build, where we build, and how we build is going to have to change. The other thing that I can kind of foresee is new construction is likely going to continue to make up a larger share of home sales, right? Our survey data from our consumers housing trend survey shows that some of the new buyers, right? New buyers are increasingly wanting to customize their space. So the desire to customize has gone up from 25% in 2021 to 35%, 10 percentage points in 1 year, right? So more people are increasingly wanting to customize their space.
Shane, are you seeing that in your buyers? What are they looking for? And what do you think if you think about affordability, what are they going to be looking for? Are they looking for smaller spaces because their homes are shrinking? Are they looking for customizable spaces? What do you see among buyers?
Yeah, I think a little of both, and to your point, the family size, and for people who have children, they're still having on average the same number of children. There are more people who are not having children, which necessitates a different type of living environment. So I think it will change the type of space, and we are seeing demands, the COVID effect of work from home. I think that pendulum will probably swing a little more towards back in the office, kind of anywhere close to where it was. And so people are wanting amenities like home offices and home gyms and things like that because they're spending so much more time in their homes. So that's something that we have seen since the pandemic, and I think that's going to really drop off.
And Orphe, you just mentioned in your list of things that people are, that there's new construction is going to drive a lot of this, right? So new construction though is happening predominantly in the Sun Belt, in places like Vegas, right? So but then Phoenix all of a sudden pulling back because of climate issues. What do you think we're going to start? Are we going to continue to see this trend of people moving toward these markets over the next 20 years? Or are we going to see people wanting to stay in the coastal cities? Or, what do you think, where do you think people are going to be headed? And how do you think those mobility trends will continue?
Yeah, look, again, I think it's all about cost. People want more bang for their buck.
Right.
And so affordability drove housing even before the pandemic. The increase in pandemic bidding wars. The bidding wars in 2021 just made that problem worse, right? And mortgage rates increasing accentuates the affordability crisis. So I think generally economists like to think we want to maximize, right? We want more for less. And like our survey data shows that people want amenities and they want to live in residential communities. Right, and so these community environments.
So do you think people are still the trend of people moving to these, to Phoenix, Vegas, Charlotte is going to continue?
I think areas that are really, really expensive and that are subject to the types of climate events that we're seeing are going to be less desirable. And so, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but what I see is, more of a move inland, right, to places that are more climate safe, that are relatively more affordable, and so that's kind of how I see things going forward.
And I'm going to get back to climate in a minute, but Shane, before we get there, you recently moved to Las Vegas, and so you're sort of now in the center of one of these hot markets. You talked a lot about seeing Vegas' development, planning for water issues and planning for the coming. What are you seeing them doing? What do you see happening here that will keep growth happening over the next 20 years?
So one thing that's interesting as maybe a counter strategy to the Phoenix strategy is not allowing new developments, and there's no water to support it. What they do here is kind of like a Hunger Games style pricing approach to water, where you don't just pay for your usage, but you pay for how much more or less you use than everyone else.
So like competitive.
Yeah, so the top 10% of water users, they penalize with higher prices per gallon or whatever the pricing is. And similarly, the lower 10% get a discount on the rate. So I think that's a perhaps more development-friendly way to solve the same problem. And to answer your question, I do think that migration will continue. And you make the point that more supply is the answer to the affordability crisis. And I think that migration is one way that kind of spreads the demand more evenly. Right. So until we get the supply that we need in those places that we want to live, people kind of naturally spread the demand by migrating to other places.
And then now to sort of shift a bit to climate change, I think the news in the last 2 weeks that State Farm and Allstate both pulled out of California, was certainly a shock to the system. How much is the insurance industry going to be leading this sort of a retreat from places like California, Florida, Louisiana, that are the most high risk for the immediate effects of climate change? Are we going to start seeing nice expensive houses not being able to be insured, or paying $15,000, $20,000 a year insurance bills? What do you sort of project from that, and how are you thinking about that in terms of economic forecasts?
No, I think right now it's kind of a shock to the system, right? But over time, things are going to change, and I think the builders essentially are going to respond to where the demand is going. And our survey shows that 77% of new construction buyers want energy efficient homes. They want smart home capabilities. And so you're going to see that shift where consumers demanding, who wants to minimize their carbon footprint. And so the homes of the future are going to have to adapt.
Do you think they're going to be smaller to that end, or they're going to be more is there going to be moved to multifamily, which can also be a bit safer in a storm?
I think the move away from detached single-family homes is already underway, and we're likely going to see more of that in the future.
And Shane, do you see buyers coming to Las Vegas and Nevada looking to climate change come up in their conversations with you at all? Like, is that something they mention? Are they just like key?
Not nearly as much as taxes come up. But I think it is. Climate change is kind of more of an existential threat up to this point. I feel like now the major insurance companies are pulling out in California. That's one of the first, oh shit, this is a real thing. We need to consider moments. And so I do know people that have very nice houses in hilly areas of California that are worried they're going to get dropped by their insurance companies. So I think it'll be a while before people stop wanting to live in those areas because of it. But I think it will get much more expensive to live there because of things like insurance.
In the short term, are people adding air filters and stuff just to build air quality during periods where there's fires nearby?
Yeah, in California, we have a long history of wildfires, and so that is an amenity of many high-end homes where people install negative pressure air filtration systems so that when their quality is horrible, they still have, they feel like their air inside of their breathing, their families are breathing, is still healthy.
And then to that end, with power outages as generators, all house generators becoming more common, are we going to see that more standard in new construction? Are we going to see air filtration systems and whole house generators become more standard in new construction in areas that are at risk of flood or fire? Yeah,
I think generators are a trend. A lot of homes in California have been installing those. I think part of that is because of the fire risk of power often gets out in those situations or earthquakes. So I think that's kind of what this is doing.
And then to go back to I want to circle back to the affordability issues. What are things that could derail movements toward any efforts to try to bring affordability under control? What are the concerns you have for runaway housing costs? I think a lot of talk is as soon as interest rates are down, housing prices will go up. I don't know if we'll see these kinds of price increases on the last 2 years, but we're certainly, I don't think people's incomes can keep up with significant price gains. What are your feelings about, what are your concerns about affordability in the next, in the future?
Of course, climate change being one of them.
Right.
Potentially labor shortages in the construction and trade might also be another one that I would be concerned about. I think supply, unlocking buildings, right? So, I think governments are going to have to adjust to the new reality that most people in this country actually support, building up.
Right. Although there's people support it in theory, but I see there's certainly quite a lot of pushback when it comes up in communities. I know even in my own community, everybody complains about home prices, but then when they say they're going to build a multi-family house, everyone has a meltdown. So it seems like there's the NIMBYism is still, it's people like it, they sort of maybe in their backyard, but not my backyard. What about, how much, what are other sort of development trends you see? What sort of design changes do you think we might see? Are we going to see, what kind of home changes do you think we might see going forward?
Well, I agree. I think building up is probably the way. Relaxing zoning restrictions has to be part of that solution. And just, like you mentioned earlier, maybe smaller unit sizes, more density. I think maybe it's not building up, but maybe it's just more density within whatever confines of that neighborhood. If it's a NIMBY neighborhood, we need to build more dense units, but not obstruct the view or whatever it is that we're about.
And do you think that as we have, if we continue this trend of people moving from the coast to the center of the country, and especially as the coasts become, or become more difficult places to live with climate change, do you think there's going to be more of a pushback from the people who've been here before? Are they not going to be super happy to have more Californians and New Yorkers moving to Florida?
I personally, I think everyone's annoyed that we're all moving here now. I've been here for 6 months, so I can be annoyed.
I haven't months.
So when I say California, that's really how I get annoyed.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a real thing. And I think you mentioned earlier, but I think Vegas has planned for growth way better than many other cities. So if you've been driving around, you see the freeways are always under construction. I think that's something they've anticipated. the growth they've seen.
What are some examples of the way they prepare better than Austin? Not to knock Austin.
So
I'll be there soon.
I think the freeway system is definitely one. And you know, people here complain about traffic. Having lived in LA previously, you know, like it just doesn't. People here, they'll say it's 17 minutes to get somewhere, and that's far. That's all the way across town. So to me, that really isn't anything. I don't think that's significant. Whereas in Austin, you can be driving for hours to go a similar distance.
Okay. And what do you, like, you know, what have you seen in cities that, like, in terms of cities that are prepared better than others, or, you know, concerns about sort of too many people, not like, I don't want to put it that way, but I guess too many people coming in?
So, yeah, I guess I thought about this a little bit. You know, during the pandemic, places that saw the migration, domestic migration, also had faster job growth, increases in job openings, faster job growth, higher wage growth at the bottom end of the distribution. When we talk about services inflation, wage growth at the bottom is much more rapid than at the top. And so you're closing the inequality, kind of wage inequality gap that was there before the pandemic. So it's benefited a lot of the locals, contrary to some of the headlines we've seen. You know.
So it hasn't had the opposite effect of high wage earners moving into, like, let's say, New Yorkers come to Charlotte where wages are lower and home prices were lower, but now home prices have picked up and they look cheap to a New Yorker, but expensive to someone from Charlotte. It's not.
Well, the people who own homes in those areas benefit greatly.
Right.
And then service workers who are tended to be at the bottom of the wage distribution actually saw their wage growth outpace inflation, while high earners did not. And so you saw this wage inequality gap actually shrink during the pandemic, and they're still doing much better than they were before, right? So the shortages we see in services have benefited lower income Americans than the group at the top.
And then, do you think we might see an increase in becoming more of a country of renters? I mean, there's this move to rental housing and single family renters, and yes, there's sort of maybe less of development, but if wealthier Americans are moving into cheap areas to buy those homes, do you think there's going to become more of a rental society than an ownership society?
I don't buy that. You don't
buy that?
No, I don't. Like we after the global financial crisis, we heard similar arguments, right? We're becoming a nation of renters, et cetera, you know, and then all of a sudden, we have this boom, right? Everybody, right? So the reason people rented was because the labor market was really weak after the global financial crisis. Once the labor market started picking up again, and you started to see wage growth at the bottom, you started to see more families form households come back in the housing market. The pandemic stimulus, lower mortgage rates obviously helped to make that happen.
But with family size shrinking, do you think we'll see more smaller units in housing, smaller homes?
Absolutely. I think there's going to be a shift towards smaller homes. I think, some of the stuff that we're seeing already, like prefab, modular homes, the construction industry is going to have to get more efficient, right? You're also going to see, container homes, movable homes. I was surprised to see, these boxable homes, right?
Yeah, tell me more about the movable homes. So, like,
right?
How movable are they?
Well, that's what it is. I think the construction sector is going to have to be clever about responding to this demand for housing and the shifts that are going to occur over time.
So are we all going to be living in like tiny houses or ADUs?
I don't know if we all want to live in tiny houses, ADUs, but I know Gen Z, right, and the generations to come are likely interested in that type of stuff, and that's what we're seeing, demand for this product increase.
And I want to open up the audience. Any questions? Yes.
Following on this movable homes, boxable homes, it just occurred to me when you started talking about that housing is so much tied to land and real estate.
Yes.
Is there, it occurred to me, what if you were to decouple housing from land? Would that solve the housing crisis? If you just had.
Yeah. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, builders are extremely good at forecasting where housing is going. Okay, they make money doing that, right? And so, so they're going to be responsive to where demand is going. wherever that is. We don't know. It's 20 years from now.
Yes.
So places like Syracuse, New York, wait for this influx of people to come to this nice city with plenty of water and a mild climate for years. And I do not see anything like that. So I'm wondering when this internal migration you're talking about is going to hit places like that,
Or like Syracuse, New York.
for example.
I have a friend who builds home in upstate New York, right? And there's plenty of people moving there. There's plenty of people who low income.
Figures don't show that.
Right? There's plenty of people. They might not be at the top, at the top of the, of the charts, in interstate migration. But there's a lot of people upstate New York who stay there, who move there maybe for university and end up staying closer to those areas. And so he's got a thriving construction business. But anyway, that could just be one example. I think that you're likely going to see people moving, responding to those constraints, right? These space constraints, climate issues, as we progress into the future.
We've seen some big shifts in demographic patterns where people, I think 18 states lost population.
Yes.
New York, California. Is this temporary or is it a long-term trend? And how will builders adjust, I guess? Declining California, declining Washington, declining.
Yeah, no, that's right. I used to live in Chicago before moving to the Seattle area. And Illinois lost population for, 10 consecutive years or something like that. And, it's still around. So, you have people coming in and you have people going, right? So I don't know. I think, that might continue. And I think that policy, like government policy, is going to have to respond to these trends to try to bring people back. They're going to try to do the best they can to adapt to those changing conditions. And so, like you said, there might be new policies in place to try to keep people in those areas that are losing people.
And to that end, do you think cities like New York and San Francisco will end up sort of just being playgrounds for the very wealthy? Will they be places where they're so expensive that there's continued brain drain and just people who have huge homes to live in?
Yeah, I'll take my example, right? So I moved from Chicago to the Seattle area about a year and a half ago, and nobody told me about the wildfires, right? And so you get into this beautiful place and you're excited, and you get to go on Whidbey Island and you see the orcas and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden you're stuck indoors.
Yeah.
Right? And so I don't know if the rich, the wealthy, are going to want to stick around unless we come up with really clever solutions to maintain a decent standard of living in those areas.
Yeah, I don't think, if enough people brain drain away, then I don't think there's anything left for even wealthy people who want to stick around for it. The tax revenue goes away and infrastructure goes away. So, it could be a downward spiral, just less desirability for ultra-wealthy people.
It's definitely going to be a challenge for policymakers, right, in those cities.
Yes.
When you see the future of buying homes, what will that process be like? We saw people buying homes on Instagram. What do you see the future of technology, social media, brokerages, that type of thing?
So I firmly believe that one day people will buy houses online. It's obviously a big choice, and there's so much feeling that you get when you're in a specific home, but everything else is bought online. Cars now are often bought online. So I think we'll see that trend accelerate. I would like to see the overall process get better and more user-friendly, because it's still, I don't know if you've all bought or sold a home recently, but it's not a great process. We find that most people love their real estate agent, but hate the process of buying or selling a home. And getting a mortgage, they have to sign a bunch of physical pieces of paper. So I think there's a lot of parts in that process that are totally stupid that I think will get better. I think technology is a big part of that. So I hope that piece improves. But to your question, I think there will be a shift towards more of that being online. And we have plenty of examples of people buying homes, like you said, on Instagram or without even seeing them. So I think that will accelerate, especially when people are migrating from for instance, a coastal city to somewhere in the center of the country where they're not physically there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the home buying process is going to have to respond to what consumers want, right? And I think consumers are, and I started by saying they're highly educated, more and more tech savvy. They don't want to load up the kids in the van and drive around all weekend looking at housing, right?
But there's something said for like seeing a house in real life and the pretty picture.
Yeah, I think they use 3D home tours to kind of narrow down their options, right? Before going to finalize the deal.
Yeah.
Curious what you think the future of real estate agents looks like. There's a lot of companies that have disrupted the traditional model and place real estate agents. What do you think 10 years from now we're still seeing the same model?
I don't know. It's again too far away, and I don't have a crystal ball. But we heard a lot about AI and potentially just making agents more efficient, right, and servicing more clients.
Yeah, I think it'll be a very long time before people are not willing to pay some price to have a human expert guide them on that. I think AI will have profound effects on the industry and productivity of many types of jobs, including real estate agent. And 20 years seems like a long time, but it's like it was Bill Gates who said we overestimate what we can do in 10 years and underestimate what we can do in 100. So I feel like in 20 years it will look much more similar to what it looks like today than we might imagine. So I don't think that real estate agents will be disrupted out of the process anytime soon. But I do think that pressure on prices will continue. So both from consumers to real estate agents, and it's totally conceivable that one of these antitrust lawsuits will get some traction, something will happen there. And on the broker side, we're seeing constant downward pressure on pricing for our customers or the agents in terms of commission splits. So I think that's a brokerage challenge that we need to solve through other revenue streams and offering better services and things like that. But I think it'll be a long time before we can take that human out of the process.
Any other questions? To that end, I want to thank you guys for your time. I hope you all had a great conference, and thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you.